Verse 676. If one should think that the Vijnana, etc., are originated by ignorance, desire and karma, this is wrong, for the fault of non-finality is committed. This being committed, the rise of the world becomes impossible. I think we're straying into Buddhist philosophy here, and I feel I must apologize to any philosophers out there that might be listening to these videos, that might be following these videos. I personally find philosophy quite sterile, very unnourishing, mainly because it comes from the mind. This might be a surprise for some of you. I think some people think my videos are a bit of a head trip, but no, I take my cue from the verses, and the verses are pointing us to our fundamental awareness. They're pointing to something beyond the mind. Occasionally though, because I'm talking about these verses, I feel I need to do some research. And this research did take me into the rather arid realms of Buddhist philosophy. So, what is going on in these verses? The previous verse started talking about dualistic notions and told us that non-duality is suchness. And it seems to me that the next 3 or 4 verses are about this. They're about duality and non-duality. And the basic duality that the Buddha says that we're caught up in is that of existence and non-existence, which isn't intuitively obvious, but that comes up in the next verse, so I'll say something about that then. Let's just stick with the current verse. This verse seems to be concerned about existence and the existence of the world, and I think we can assume here that what's meant here by world is suffering, the world of ills. It's the world of suffering, and from the relative point of view, there is this world of suffering. But let's have a look at this verse in some more detail. If one should think that the Vijnana, etc., well, it'd be quite nice to know what the etc. is, but I think we can assume it's the sequence of conditioned co-production as Vijnana, and gives rise to perception and the senses and all the rest of it. In other words, it gives rise to what we call the Paratantric reality. The Paratantric reality is what we could call the objective world, which consists of objects and beliefs that are interdependent. And we're told that it's wrong to think that this is originated by ignorance, desire and karma. And yet this is what was taught back in verse 50. Ignorance, desire and karma, they are the causes of mind and its belongings. As they evolve thus relatively, they are recognized by me to be paratantric. And ignorance, desire and karma, they actually have their own video, which is video 45. So let's see if we can get some perspective on this. I suspect this verse is looking a little bit more deeply. Ignorance, desire and karma, we're in a state of ignorance, which means we're basically on automatic. We have these desires and we act in accordance with these desires so that these desires might be fulfilled. This is karma. Karma simply means activity or actions here. So verse 50 was saying that this creates our world. This creates the world that we inhabit. It's the arena by which we try to act out our desires. But we're told this is wrong because the fault of non-finality is committed. I suspect a more modern rendering would be the fault of infinite regression. The philosophical problem here is, if the world is created by our desires, ignorance and activity, then what gave rise to our ignorance, desires and karma? And as I said, I believe this verse is looking a little bit more deeply, because there's a factor deeper than our desires which has to be called into operation, and that is the factor of discrimination. We have to be able to discriminate objects, which is what I think these verses here are about. So let's have a look at verse 677. The fourfold destruction of things is told by the unenlightened. Discrimination is said to rise in two ways. In fact, there is no existence, no non-existence. When one is released from the fourfold proposition, one abandons dualism. So really what we're concerned here is with abandoning dualism. And the most fundamental dualism is that of a me here experiencing a world out there. The previous verse was concerned with the arising of the world. And this next verse begins with the destruction of things, the destruction of the world, which in traditional thinking is by one of four ways. The fourfold destruction relates to destruction by the elements. So we've got earthquakes, we've got floods, we've got fire, and we've got wind. So this is the fourfold destructions. And so this relates to non-existence. And perhaps in the Buddha's time, just as in the time of Christ, many people were living in accordance with the belief that it was the end of days. Certainly Jesus Christ thought that his generation was the last. And in Hindu belief we have various yugas, and at the end of each yuga, at the end of each age, the universe dissolves in accordance with destruction by the elements. So as I said, do we really operate in terms of existence and non-existence? The Buddha said that these were two extremes that our behaviour is determined by, and the alternative he offered was the middle way, the eightfold path. I have touched on the theme of existence and non-existence now and again through the course of these videos. I did read one article, or read some of it anyway, which associated this with some Freudian principle of eros and the principle of thanatos. But I don't think this is something that we can relate to. We are affected by what we don't have, which is non-existence, and we're affected by what we do have. This is existence. I think we have to look at it in this more immediate, relevant way, because this drives our actions in our ignorance. We pursue what we don't have, and we protect what we have. Or perhaps we try to get rid of what we have. So existence and non-existence here is really to do with what we have and what we don't have. This propels our behaviour. So the alternative that the Buddha gives us is that of our spiritual training, to step back from this So we're told here that discrimination is said to rise in two ways. And I think that discrimination can be understood in terms of not having something and we want it, and having something and we want to keep it or get rid of it. But what we're being told here is that in fact there is no existence, no non-existence, because there's actually nothing to have. There's actually nothing to not have, because existence and non-existence presupposes an external world. So we're told that there is no existence and no non-existence. When one is released from the fourfold proposition, one abandons dualism. Well, no existence and no non-existence is actually one of the fourfold propositions. Fourfold proposition is existence is one, non-existence is two, both existence and non-existence is three, and neither existence nor non-existence is four. But this is all rooted in philosophical understanding. It's thinking about the world. This is what philosophers do. It's what we do, because we're all ultimately philosophers. But the spiritual practitioner drops this. The spiritual practitioner bypasses the mind, which is preoccupied with this. There is something going on, which we can call the world, but it is not a world of things, of objects. Of things that we can have, or things that we can't have. That world is false. That world also consists of a me which can have things, or a me which doesn't have things. So along with abandoning the world, we abandon me. And we come back once again to this amazing subjectivity which I've been talking about in recent videos. And this means that we don't need to allow our emotional state, our moods, to be determined by what we have or what we don't have. This is the freedom that is on offer here. We abandon that discrimination which focuses on what we have or on what we don't have. I think this is the more pertinent meaning of existence and non-existence. And we get on with our practice. And this practice is expressed by the Buddha as the eightfold path. But what it essentially means is observing our behaviour. And when we observe that it's being driven by desire for what we have, desire for what we don't have, or desire to protect what we do have, then we remember there's a bigger picture. This is our meditation. This is our meditation. We come back to prime or pure subjectivity and realize that how we feel ultimately need not be dependent on the world and the conventional understanding of the world anyway. And then when we act once again, we act more and more from wisdom. This is the threefold training embodied in the eightfold path our behavior, sila, our meditative realization, which is samadhi, and operating free from notions of an individual and an external world. This is wisdom, or prajna. So this is the option we've got. This is the path to the end of suffering.